Warning. This podcast features the truth about owning and operating mobile home parks. The following program is not designed to be sexy. It will not hype you up on MHPs. Rather, this is a raw take on this industry and how you find your own path to success. Welcome to MHP IRL, Mobile Home Parks in Real Life, with your host, Ryan Norris.
It has become alarmingly popular to beat up on landlords and developers to the point where you're seeing major news outlets, New York Times, Washington Post, even my local Charlotte Observer, just absolutely beating up on landlords and developers. And unfortunately, that is what media is nowadays. Media is eyeballs. Media is what is going to get someone to click, like, subscribe, forward, and basically spread misinformation for profit, to be quite blunt. And those listening in, the majority of you listen in because this is literally called Mobile Home Parks in Real Life. So what we do on this podcast, and my goal with it, is to not sell anything, not ask you for anything, just be a beacon of raw, unfiltered truth. And what we are going to do today is we are going to provide a rebuttal to all of those nasty grams that are basically going out from all of these major news outlets that are omitting some very important things about our space. So I would like to welcome back Daniel Weisfield to the podcast. Daniel is an unbelievably talented individual, and he is eloquent, well-researched, and incredibly experienced. And his article that served as a rebuttal to not just the Washington Post and New York Times and everything, but just in general, this misinformation is, in a word, perfect. So I wanted to give Daniel another chance on the podcast to have a microphone to help combat this misinformation. So Daniel, thank you again for coming back. Thank you for being a champion of our space. Welcome, man. Let's get after it. Let's combat misinformation.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on, Ryan. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, let's hit it. So listen, in your article, why don't you just give everyone who hasn't read it, and by the way, I'm going to drop the article in the show notes. Why don't you give folks a high level of kind of what the theme of it was, and then we're going to get down into the nitty-gritty of the article.
Sure. So there's basically an entire genre of literature at this point, bashing mobile home park owners and treating mobile home park owners as predators who are preying on their residents. And we've seen that in the New York Times, in the Washington Post, in the New Yorker, on John Oliver, on NPR. You know, every 2 or 3 weeks, someone in my network will email me, hey, did you see this new one? Right? And it's always the same story. And it's getting really old because it's not true. And it's not true because it selectively highlights certain facts and certain examples and leaves out other key facts which tell a very different story. And for me, the most important thing I want to get across to the audience is housing is an essential service, and mobile home park owners are providing that essential service. So as society, we don't bash farmers who grow food, but we don't bash the bakers who grow bread, and we don't bash doctors and nurses who provide healthcare and teachers who provide teaching. Why are we bashing mobile home park owners who are providing affordable housing and working hard every day to do it well? And there are certain reasons why I think mobile home park owners in particular get bashed this way when, single family home developers and apartment owners do not. And so you and I can talk more about what those nuances are. But I think one of the really important things is this is offensive to mobile home park residents.
Yeah.
It is perpetuating hurtful stereotypes, treating mobile home park residents as victims, when in fact, our residents are wonderful people seeking value, and I wish they would interview your residents or my residents who are so proud of where they live.
Can't agree more. My residents are not victims. My residents are wonderful people that a lot of whom choose to be there. And just briefly, I wanted to say the number one reason I think people choose to stick around a mobile home park is community. Just one word, community. And that community happens because of all of the reasons they list out in these articles. There is continuity of residence. Folks stay. And as a father, I will tell you, it takes a village to raise a kiddo. There is nothing like babysitters, people when your wife is pregnant to come over and cook for you, help you clean. Look, watch out for the community. I literally yesterday had a conversation with one of my residents myself, which I'm very adamant about doing, about a criminal who wandered onto the property, and we promptly called the police and escorted him out. And he doesn't speak any English, but it's funny, on your iPhone, you hit the little like or the little love button. And I learned that on the iPhone in Spanish, it's lo encanto, which means I love it. So he clicked the little lo encanto button, because what I told him was, in so many words, look, I'm going to work side by side with you to provide a clean and safe community. And because his concern was, well, this guy showed up at 7 p.m. after hours. Like, can I get a hold of everyone? And my answer was yes. That's exactly what I did. I checked my phone late last night to see if this guy showed back up. And that community is achieved when you don't have an average turnover of 18 months like apartments do. So, yeah, I cannot agree more with you, Daniel. There is a reason why millions of Americans choose this lifestyle, and it is a strategic omission by these news outlets, because it just destroys the sexy pitch that they have to bash this space and those residents, because that's what gets them eyeballs. Misinformation or strategic omissions get more eyeballs than telling the whole picture.
Yeah. And I'm happy, Ryan, I think I used an example in that article that I wrote, and maybe I can share it with your listeners now.
Please.
Because I think this is the mental model that describes what the issue we're talking about. So imagine in your town, there's a bakery. And that bakery used to sell bread for 50 cents. It was the cheapest bakery in town. And there are lots of other bakeries in town who sell bread for $3. $3 is kind of the normal rate that a lot of people are paying, but there was one discount bakery, high value, it sold bread for 50 cents, and every day people lining up at the door to buy it. And now, fast forward to 2022, prices have gone up, labor costs have gone up, flour costs have gone up, sugar costs have gone up, their rent has gone up, their utility costs have gone up, and that bakery that used to charge 50 cents now charges $1. Everyone else in town still charges $3. So prices have gone up 2x. Sorry, 1x. The price has doubled. And you've still got people lining up to buy these loaves, right? Because a dollar is more expensive than 50 cents. It's a lot cheaper than $3. So what do you think of that bakery? Are they villains because they've doubled the price of their affordable bread? Or should they be respected and praised for providing a high value product that people are lining up to buy? And that is the crux of the issue here. And with mobile home parks, you have two people who see that same set of facts, and they line up on both sides, and they have very different points of view. And I am here to say, doubling the price on that loaf of bread to $1 is perfectly acceptable when you're in a market where you still have people lining up to buy the product because it is a high value product that people want to buy.
Yeah, and I see the headline right now, Baker doubles his price, affecting impoverished residents and the local community, and just blatantly ignoring the fact that everything else is 3 times that.
Exactly. And I used to, it's funny, I think in our industry, because we get um, criticized so frequently by the mainstream media, there's an instinct to do two things. Number one is hide, right? A lot of park operators won't talk to the media, and then our story never gets out. So I don't think that's the right way to do it. I think it's important to tell our story. Or number two, park operators will talk to the media, but they'll try and say, well, we're nice park operators, we're good park operators, we're different than the other park operators who are raising rents really aggressively. And as I have been in this space longer, I have really come to believe that we operate in a market environment, and you cannot stop the forces of a market. You really can't. There are giant economic and demographic forces that cause prices to move the way that they move. And so I no longer really criticize those other operators who are raising rents, quote unquote, too aggressively. I have my business practices that I follow. You have yours. They might have theirs. But at the end of the day, if you're providing manufactured home lot rent and providing a high quality community, and your rent is still cheaper than apartments, probably still the cheapest game in town, and you're providing high value to your residents, you're providing a high value social service. And I just fundamentally believe that if there are certain individual residents who can't afford to pay those rents, they need help, right? The same way that people can't afford food, need help and get help from the government. If you can't afford health insurance, you get help from the government. If you can't afford housing, then as a society, we can help you. That is on the demand side from the customer. I don't think that means that on the supply side, we have an obligation to suppress rents and keep rents artificially cheaper than what the market will pay.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There's also scores of articles and research and data that back up why governments messing with pricing, not just rents, but pricing in general, just completely backfires. And the funny thing is, it's not just research studies, it's history. You can literally go back to Greco-Roman times and see examples of when governments have got involved and artificially capped prices, and it just destroys an economy. Not immediately, but over time. So I couldn't agree more. And look, to be fair, so the Charlotte Observer, for example, had, say, 6 pages, and they dedicated 1 page, or the majority of 1 page, to highest and best use. And a couple episodes ago, I broke down in very simple terms why a market like Charlotte, North Carolina, where you really can't rent anything, an apartment, for under $1,500 a month, why a mobile home park, a small mobile home park inside the 485 loop, was bought by these folks who are developers. And the lot rent was something like $200-300. And, you find the one resident who, for better or for worse, is willing to basically share all the sob story. And the funny thing is, I know the woman who's helping her, and I've reached out. I have a relationship with this woman. I was like, hey, guess what? I have units. That's what I've heard back. Nothing, which is really disappointing because, like you just mentioned there, Daniel, there are people who are willing to help, myself included. Like, you can call me. There's another example out in Raleigh, North Carolina, where a developer came in, and there's 40 units that it was something like $300, well, septic, trash, landscaping, all included, in Wake County, North Carolina, which is the #1 fastest growing county in the country. 40 lot mobile home park. A developer bought it, similar to the one in Charlotte, dramatically under rent. And this developer offers density, right? He's going to put in 200 townhomes and pack in the density, which Wake County needs because you don't have enough supply. So increasing supply will help keep costs down on the whole. But you have a handful of folks who, by the way, I personally also reached out to and said, hey, I own in Raleigh. Why don't you either move your mobile home over to us, or by the way, I have some vacant units. Guess how many people I heard from? None. A big fat zero. So there are people out there trying to help, But like you just alluded to there, and what I want to hit on, and what thankfully the Charlotte Observer said is, look, you have a market where it is telling you density is needed, and you have a parcel of land that is zoned for density. So you don't even need to jump through that many hoops. The town needs it. And even then, instead of having a $300 lot rent, if you simply went to $500, like I broke down on that episode, I'll drop the link in the show notes. If you raised it from 200 or 300 to 500, it would, and ran it appropriately, you actually would maintain the highest and best value as a mobile home park. So ironically, you have to make it a little less affordable to keep it affordable. So going back to your bakery, for example, because I loved that. When you look at that, for example, that baker is probably not making much, if any, of a profit. That baker, by charging 50 cents when the market is $3, is likely having to cut some corners. Even if he's an honest baker, he's likely having to cut some corners. And the first thing people are going to say is it's greed, when the truth is it's him just trying to keep afloat. And what's going to happen to that baker is he's going to close his doors, and it's going to be gone, and the media is going to bash him the entire time.
That's exactly right. It's like, you can't win.
Right.
As a mobile home park operator.
Can't win.
Yeah. And I love the point you're making about the parks in North Carolina that are being redeveloped to a quote unquote higher and better use of multifamily, when in fact you're saying, if the operator were to charge more appropriate market rents, it could stay in use as a mobile home park. Yeah. And the residents could stay, and they could have lot rents at $500, which is a lot cheaper than the multifamily rents they'll find elsewhere. So you're seeing that, live in real time in your market in North Carolina. We've been seeing the exact same issue in Colorado, where there's recently been a lot of legislative activity, which I think is really, I spoke to the state legislator who sponsored all this legislation, Representative Bosenmaker in Colorado. And, I testified in front of the state Senate. And I really think Representative Bosenmaker has been influenced by all of these exact stories we're talking about, by this media narrative, which planted an idea in his head that mobile home park owners are the enemies of society who he needs to protect residents from. And we had conversations, and it was a fixed idea, right? He was unwilling to actually change his opinion and listen to the reality of what we're doing, a very certain idea. And as a result, the legislation that's been pushed will cause parks in Colorado to be closed, because they were pushing statewide rent control, telling park owners how much they can and can't charge. And you have park owners who are buying dilapidated parks that were built in the 1940s and 1950s with failing infrastructure. And this is, a good friend of mine recently bought a park in Loveland, Colorado, failing infrastructure. He went and he invested money to fix the sewer, fix the roads, fix the water leaks, upgrade the failing electrical infrastructure, make it a decent community, and raise the rents accordingly to, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I think he raised the rents to $750 or $800 a month. And like you said, you got to raise the rents if you're going to invest in the community and also make a profit, which a business needs to do. If you didn't do that, this community would eventually shut down due to failing infrastructure. And the $800 rents he's charging are still cheaper than any other park in the market, and way cheaper than apartment rents. And the residents have homes that are appreciating in value and are actually making money, and nobody talks about that.
Let's come back to this. What I want to talk about right now is let's overcome those objections. Let's address why our residents are not victims. And you have a wonderful example in your article of the Andrews family in Torrance, California. Explain with some numbers to back you up, like you did in your article, why not only the Andrews family is not a victim, they're winning.
Yeah, thank you. So Here's the narrative in the Washington Post article. Miss Andrews is a victim because she bought a mobile home in a mobile home park in Torrance, California, 6 years ago for $5,000. She's a low-income individual. She invested her, a substantial sum for her, $5,000, her savings to buy a home in a park. And when she bought it, the lot rent was $900 a month. Here we are 6 years later. Lot rent has been raised to $1,700 a month. And she is struggling to pay rent. And she feels trapped because she can't move her home. Her home is not actually that mobile. So she feels like she has been on the losing side of this equation. That's the story the Washington Post published for millions of Americans to read. So let me tell you the other side of the story and why I believe she's a winner. And why there are literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people living in LA County right now who wish they were in her shoes. So Torrance, California. Median single-family home price is over $1.1 million. That's not to buy a fancy house. That's to buy a modest, probably 3-bedroom, 2-bath ranch house. Over $1 million. Medium rent for a 2-bedroom apartment, $3,000. Okay, this is Torrance. It's a great community on the beach. You've got hospitals, you've got schools, you've got jobs, you've got parks, you've got retail, all sorts of services. Okay, so I believe she's a winner for 3 reasons. Number one, she was able to live in Torrance. This is a great community with rents that she could afford. Right? She had access to schools and services and parks. We don't, as a society, I don't believe we want segregation and communities where these services are for the rich and these services are for the middle class and
Exactly.
These services are for the poor or the working class. Social integration is good. It's good for society. It creates social opportunity. It creates social mobility. So if you can have a mobile home park, which is a pocket of affordability in a higher end community, that is a good social outcome. Right. Number 2, rent savings. She saved $50,000 to $100,000 over 6 years by paying mobile home lot rent instead of paying for a 1-bedroom apartment. Right? So yeah, you could say her rent went up, but this is the bakery example. Her rent went up from $900 to $1,700, but if you compare it to what it would have cost her to rent an apartment, she saved up to $100,000 over 6 years. Okay, and then the third reason she's a winner, she has made a ton of money by buying that $5,000 home in a park and allowing it to appreciate. And here's where we need to correct a myth. There is an idea that mobile homes depreciate in value just like a car the second you drive it off the lot, and that's not true. And there's also a false narrative that mobile home park residents might not be able to afford moving their mobile home. Therefore, they are trapped and the home does not have value. And as you know, and as I know, that's not how the mobile home park world works.
Right.
When someone wants to leave a mobile home park, they sell their mobile home in place, just like real estate, and someone comes and buys it. And in a well-managed community, that is an appreciating asset.
Yep.
In fact, there was a study done last year that showed the median value of mobile homes from 2014 to 2019 increased 39%. The appreciation of mobile homes was much higher than for single-family homes because mobile homes started at such a lower valuation point.
Right.
And so just to kind of to finish up, sorry, this is running a little long here. When I say that Miss Andrews' home appreciated, she spent $5,000 on a mobile home in Torrance. I made an offer in that article, and I stand by it. I will offer $20,000 for that home today, sight unseen. I am sure it is worth that much, and it might be worth $50,000 or $100,000, depending on the condition. So she has literally put cash in her pocket and built wealth by owning this home in this park.
Yeah, these mobile home communities, if I read somewhere recently that 90% of mobile homes in their lifetime move once, and that's from the factory to wherever they wind up. So 9 out of 10, they're getting moved one time.
Yeah.
And that basically creates a single family home subdivision within mobile home parks that serve a subsect of the population who, for example, you see this all the time. Oh, if you're buying a mobile home, you should buy the land too. Great. I don't disagree. It'd be great if you also own the land too. The problem is, do you know how much a septic costs to replace? If your septic goes out, you're talking $10,000 to $15,000. And that's, by the way, if the soil properly percolates. What about wells? How much does it cost to re-drill a well? You're talking $40,000 plus, depending on the aquifer. Do you need nitrate filters? Is there radon in the water? There is an enormous cost that is doing nothing but skyrocketing with inflation to infrastructure. So you have a subsect of the population that does not have access to credit. The majority of people that apply and live in my mobile home parks, are a huge chunk, at least if not the majority, they have very limited credit or challenged credit, and I work with them. And these folks can't just shell out 10, 15 grand to replace a septic tank or leach lines. These folks can't just go get a bank loan for that. It's very difficult to find chattel lending, by the way. So in other words, you have a subset of the population who are wonderful people that don't want to share walls with a neighbor, right? They want to have a yard. They want to have their kids ride around a community with bikes and not fear that they're going to get, shot at or caught in the crosswind of gunfire, or they drive by drug dealers, right? They want an opportunity to live somewhere safe and clean. They don't have the ability to fix infrastructure. They want to be able to exit with ease, which, by the way, you can close a mobile home within a couple hours because it's a title, assuming all the paperwork is there, right? So in other words, these serve a subsect of the community of good, hardworking people that deserve a chance. And just like you said, you use the word offensive, and that is absolutely spot on. What the slap in the face to me, Daniel, is with all these articles is the omission of the folks who are able to move into a community like Torrance, construction workers, divorcees, people who are school teachers, who need affordable housing, who have children, who want a clean, safe place for these children, who want a good school district, who want access to things to not create segregation between the haves and have-nots, and to give their children that American dream, to allow them to study hard, go to college, start a business, go and work for a great company, have a wonderful career. And living in a community, there's study after study that point to one of the number one factors in having a child break out of the cycle of poverty is a good education and not to be around crime. And what people like me
and as you said in the past, stable housing.
Stable housing
from apartment to apartment every 12 months.
Right.
That's another huge factor.
Not one mention of any of that.
Yeah.
And any of these articles.
Yeah. Well, right. And actually, the hair stood up on my arms a little bit as you were saying that, because you said it so convincingly. And I think it's so important for people out there to know and understand. Residents are not choosing to move into our parks, out of shame because they have no other options. And so they are shuffling in with their head, their head down. They have to live in a mobile home park. Right. Our typical resident, well, there are two categories. One is working class family, like you said, a construction worker, landscaping, hourly worker in retail. Those would be typical profiles who've been renting apartments and have finally saved up enough to buy a mobile home in our park and are so excited about their first opportunity at homeownership.
Yeah.
And it's not the same as owning a home with land. They don't have as much control, and they won't get the underlying appreciation in the land. But as you said, they live in a safe, well-managed community. They don't have to deal with infrastructure costs if major systems go bad. And they do own an appreciating asset.
Right.
And just to give two really quick examples, one park we have in Renton, Washington is a very working class park that fits that profile. And there we had families buying old 1960s single wide homes for, $5,000, $6,000. They've fixed up their homes, and we have improved the park with paving and street lights and a community garden and new signage. And now those homes are worth $25,000, $30,000 for these old single wides. Major wealth creation for working class Americans.
Yeah. Please.
Sorry, just second example, flip your mental model. Imagine Susie Wilson and her husband, John, who's an engineer, and they're in their 60s and the kids are out of the house, and they decided to sell their single family home for $500,000 and move into a Class A manufactured housing community, which is age restricted, so they can be with like-minded folks, downsize, and enjoy their retirement. We own a park like that on the Oregon coast. It's called Emerald Coast Estates. It's gorgeous, ocean views, saltwater pool, got a koi pond, beautiful homes, looks like a subdivision. When those homes were sold 20 years ago, new, they sold for around $120,000. Now, guess how much they're reselling for?
I don't know if I want to know.
I don't know. Over $300,000.
Oh my god!
For a mobile home in our park with no land. I'm trying to prove the point. These are appreciating assets, and these our residents are not victims.
Yeah, I have countless examples, time and time again, of folks who've moved into one of our communities. We invest outside the community, outside in the community, while they invest inside. That's what I say to folks, by Spanish folks too. Adentro, afuera, right? Like, you're focusing on the inside, I'm focusing on the outside. And I cannot tell you, a recent example of mine, I had a single mother buy a home for $5,000. And long story short, her family ended up moving to Tampa, Florida. And so she was able to sell her home in short order for $20,000. So she bought it for $5,000, she sold it for $20,000, she moved closer to family. She used those funds to move closer to family. And again, the home, there's no complaint about, I have to live in a mobile home park, or I'm trapped, or this, that, and the other thing. And it all comes down to this for me. We have politicians and news media outlets and just people in general complaining about a lack of affordable housing. And they're right. There is a lack of affordable housing. And the Charlotte Observer is right when they say Charlotte, North Carolina is 20 to 30,000 affordable units short today. So it would take decades to build that, and we need it today. So imagine what's going to happen in decades with the growth rate. Daniel, we have units now that are zoned, that are, all they need is some capital and legislation to just leave us alone. What you guys have done really well at your organization, which I strive for in mine, is you're able to buy and bring in homes. So you have the power, water, sewer sitting right there. It's a vacant unit, a vacant lot rather. And all you need to do is have the capital, the time, the love and care to bring that in, get it set up, get it leased up, help people create value. That unit is sitting there. And what we've seen, for example, in Cabarrus County, North Carolina, outside of Charlotte, is they just passed legislation this year in 2022 that basically says and this is not an uncommon thing, if you have a vacant pad in a mobile home park that sits vacant for more than 180 days, you lose it. So you're talking actual units of affordable housing that are already zoned. The infrastructure already exists. It just needs some TLC. Someone needs to have the capital, whether that's a person who's going to buy their own home and move it in, or whether the community is going to buy it and move it in. It already exists. It just needs no threat of having, rents, for example, New York State capped at 3% increases a year when inflation is on the low end 8% right now, right? So in other words, you're giving rent discounts every year. You think anybody in New York State is going to invest in their infrastructure? No, why would they, right? Because they can't. They're going to lose money on it. So people can't trade out of their mobile home parks, even if they want to, right? And so what you have is you have actual units of affordable housing that just need people like you and I, Daniel, who are passionate, who have the investors who are willing to back us because they believe in us and in our passion. We just need politicians to stop shooting themselves in the foot, because at the end of the day, that legislation is all about NIMBYism. They don't want it in my backyard. Oh, affordable housing is great over there, right? Like, oh my gosh, there are people like you and I out here who are desperately trying to address this issue, and we are getting shot in the foot by people who don't want it in their backyard.
Yeah, it's a scandal. It is a scandal that mobile home parks are treated like contraband housing. Right. Contraband housing that we need to zone out, eliminate. In the case you described, North Carolina, throw away. We are throwing away perfectly good housing. It's as much of a scandal as, burning piles of medicine or baking lots of fresh bread and burning it instead of feeding it to hungry. Like we have a government cannot solve the affordable housing problem. The way to solve the affordable housing problem is supply. And we are here willing and able to provide high quality, financially attainable housing. That's what we do. So we do every day. That's what you do. I built a whole company to do that. We installed, hundreds of brand new homes that our tenants love. And we are, bringing, literally creating housing at a price point that no one can beat. Because when you build a house in a factory, it's fundamentally cheaper. And I think enlightened cities are starting to understand we are the answer. There are certain municipalities that are welcoming this with open arms. But unfortunately, there's way too much stigma, and the media articles that we're talking about are perpetuating the wrong story.
Right, because in my opinion, one big issue is single family homes. And specifically when you have this idea of a white picket fence, an acre of land, a middle class home, it's over. If you look at developers, single family homes are going in one of two directions. You're either getting affordable or you're getting luxury. There's no startup home for a millennial. That's dead. They're not building that out anymore. And if you look at, for example, Gaston County outside of Charlotte, which I've spent a lot of time with the local folks, they're not shy to tell you, look, we need at least, say, $350,000 worth of taxable value for a single family home to be built because of police, infrastructure, schools, yada, yada, yada. So they're looking at this like, look, we're Gaston County for the longest time. We've been kind of the punchline of Charlotte, and now everyone wants to move here. Boy, you better believe we're going to capitalize on this, right? No fault of their own, right? I don't blame them, right? But is that the correct answer? If you've got Charlotte, North Carolina, which is plus or minus 2.5 million in the greater MSA and growing and at a top 10 city in the country rates, is the right answer to to park one family with 2 adults and 2.5 kids on an acre? Or is we're already 20,000+ units of affordable housing light, and you're only building upper middle class to luxury stuff? Or is the right answer to allow density? Or is the answer when you already have the infrastructure or the unit there?
Yeah,
to just
use what you got.
People to do it. And I get it when you talk to these city council members and stuff, like their constituents, their number one wealth is their single family home with their little plot of land. And from their perspective, if I live in my single family home with 2.5 kids, 2 adults, and the supply is being kept artificially low and demand keeps going up, what's happening to me? I'm getting richer. So I'm telling my city council person, I don't want a mobile home park in my backyard. I don't want density because I don't want more traffic, right? So ultimately, I think the answer lies, Daniel, in having supply And unfortunately, the answer also is that the general public needs to be understanding that supply is the right answer, meaning that's going to come at a sacrifice, meaning single family homes are not the right answer, meaning in a long-winded way, misinformation or strategic omission around a very viable answer is deleterious to the overall scope of fixing this affordable housing issue. So in a very long-winded way, Daniel, we have to combat this misinformation. We need density. We need to support affordable housing, and we need the general public to understand why what they're doing to protect their single-family home value in their mind, which, by the way, I'm not necessarily convinced that would overly hurt someone in a Charlotte, North Carolina, having more density close to them, but that's a conversation for another day. We need the general public to understand this. Otherwise, we're all just voting in politicians who are going to either do nothing or pass deleterious legislation that's just going to end up hurting everyone. And you're not going to see it immediately. They're going to be out of office before the long-term effects hit.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you said it better than I could say it, but I just want to highlight for folks. One of the biggest drivers of inflation right now that's hitting Americans in their pocketbook is rent. Yes, gas, yes, food, but rent is a huge driver. How do you solve that? We need more housing. And housing can take a lot of flavors, right? There's no one right answer. It depends on your family size, your culture, your price point, what you're looking for. And we need single family, we need multifamily, and we need manufactured housing communities all day long.
Daniel, I have nothing but respect for you, my friend. You are one of the smartest, most passionate people in our space. I am so glad to have you back on here. Got to ask this question. Did we miss anything?
We could talk about this all day long, but I thank you for creating this platform to talk about the reality of manufactured housing. And I hope some of the folks out there who maybe didn't understand some of the basics here will walk away with a different point of view. Understanding manufactured homes and well-managed parks appreciate. This is a source of wealth creation for our residents, and our residents are choosing this lifestyle and choosing this type of housing because of all the benefits that it provides.
I want to echo all of that, and those listening in, obviously my audience is heavily skewed to people who are going to agree with what you and I've said because they're aspiring community owners or already community owners. So if you are listening in, what I will say is this information, you need to share it because the people we need to win over are the constituents who vote in these politicians who either do nothing or they do negative things to pass legislation that ultimately hurts everyone. So Daniel, I cannot thank you enough for coming back. Listeners, please share this information. If not directly sharing this episode, share this information. We need to combat misinformation and strategic omissions in the greater space for the greater good. But Daniel, I'm going to drop your article in the show notes. For those listening in that want to check that out, you need to. It is an absolute must read. I'm going to drop in a link to the highest and best value episode that I have where I break down the math. Daniel, cannot thank you enough for coming on, my friend. It's been awesome.
Thank you for everything you do. Thank you, Ryan.
Take care, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.
Entrepreneurs make mistakes, but with the overwhelming amount of free information out there, you don't have to be doomed to making those same mistakes. You just have to find a consolidated version of the most important information. What if I told you I'll gift you all of my DD mistakes I've made over the years for free? Just leave me a 5-star review, screenshot the review after it goes live, and email it to me at my website, archimedesgrp.com. Afterwards, join our Facebook group, Mobile Home Park Mastermind. You'll find hundreds of other mobile home park owners sharing ideas, contractors, and deals. It's free to join, and we would absolutely love having you join us.